Hey, what's going on? Justin here from Modern Mixing, and today is part 2 of how to mix a hip-hop vocal instrument into an instrumental. And today I'm going to be talking about the actual instrumental, or the beat. So we had a couple issues with the beat, and we needed to somehow fix those, but without taking away too much from the production. Because what happens in cases of mixing a vocal into an instrumental, it's like 99% of the time you're gonna have to sacrifice something, either in the vocal or in the production. And the way that I usually like to go about it is I'd like to sacrifice a little bit in the production because the vocal's the star of the show. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of times what happens is people get the instrumentals and then they work the vocals so much just so that they can fit inside the production. But my philosophy is to maybe work the production a little bit and then get the vocals to live inside the production as naturally as they possibly can. So, we need to figure out a way somehow to balance so that the vocals feel like they were meant to live inside of that production the way it was, but also them to sound natural. So we don't want to use too much processing, too much EQ. And if we do use a lot of processing, we want to hide it. We don't want it to be heard. So that's kind of what we had to do in this case. We had to take a little bit away from the production, but I also added a little bit too. For instance, I added a kick and I added 2 snares. So let's kind of get into it. Let's start with the actual production itself. So I use this Many American EQ, and this thing sounds great when it's boosted, but it also sounds really good when you cut things away. So the vocals, I felt like were living, I tried both 1.6 and 3.2, and it felt like when I pulled away from the 3.2, the vocals kind of popped out just a little bit more. So that's why I took out about 0.6 dBs on that at about 3.2, and that's all I really did with this EQ. Then I used this EQ 3.7 band because I wanted to get a little bit more accurate with the cut. There was some frequency around this range that was kind of, boomy or boxy, and the vocals took up some space in that region, and by pulling this out, it opened up the beat, and it just made the track a little bit more intelligible, or the vocals more intelligible anyways, and they kind of it felt like once I pulled this out, the beat and the vocal now coexisted with one another better anyways. So what I'll do is I'll solo this track, and then I'll audition it before and after these plugins, and we'll see what it sounds like. So as of right now, it might seem like there's kind of a lot going on, but yeah, trust me, once everything else comes into it, I added some other stuff, but also once the vocals come into it, it makes a little bit more sense. So yeah, like I said, there's going to be times, I mean, you'll come across sometimes instrumentals where the vocals and instrumental, for whatever reason, they just magically fit together. But most of the cases, that's not what happens. So you do have to do a little bit of work. Sometimes it's not quite this dramatic like with this EQ, say, but you might have to cut some other areas just to kind of make the vocals fit in there. So the next thing I did was I added this kick, the top kick, and the thing with this production is the kick and the bass were very concentrated together in the low end. So there wasn't a lot of mid-range to the kick. He did have another sample. It sounded like a synth that was over top of the bass line. So the bass line had a pretty decent predominance in the mid-range, but the kick was kind of lacking. So I added this sample here, and I did a little bit of work to it just to kind of make it fit better. So we cut out some of this mid-range and the low end and focused our efforts here on the the upper mids, and then I cut out some of the top end here as well. And then I added this saturation knob. I tried a couple other plugins, including the Many American distortion, but I like the way that when I push this one up, the saturation knob, it kind of splattered the kick a little bit, but in a nice way. So it kept all those nice high and mid-range frequencies in the kick that I wanted, and but then it kind of just splattered it, so it kind of moved it out of the way of the vocal somehow. Like I said, I don't know exactly how I did it, but it also added some harmonics. So that's why I use this one. So let's audition it with and without the beat, and then I'll bring these in. All right, let's bring the beat in now. Again, like I said, the beat kind of had a haunting feel to it, so I didn't want to take away too much from that, but we needed something in there so that when you're listening to it on, low fidelity speakers, or you turn the volume down, you can catch the kick and it doesn't just sound like vocals and a snare. So next, we used the snare verse, and this was just to add a little bit more weight to the actual snare that was there, give it a little bit more reverb presence. Because this snare had a built-in reverb, so it gave the actual snare that was in the beat a little bit more sustain, and I just felt like it carried, the track and the snare a little bit better. So I added the stereo width just to give it some more width, because it was a stereo sound, but it was more concentrated to the center, so I have it at about 130%, and this kind of just opened it up and made it, wider in the track. Next, I use this EQ, cutting out some of this mid-range, because again, there was something about the vocal that sat in this range kind of naturally, anywhere from like 400 to like 1.5K maybe, and in this case, it's centered around 530 hertz, and again, it just opened up this snare sample and allowed the vocal to kind of sit in that space, and then I also boosted some on the bottom end so that it had a little bit more weight to it, so it wasn't so so it wasn't so thin sounding, I guess. So let's audition the snare and then we'll bring it into the production. Alright, so let's bring this production in now and see what it sounds like. So the last thing we use is this chorus snare, and this was just to give the chorus a little bit more weight than the actual verses. So yeah, and I didn't really do anything to it either. I felt like the snare sound itself sounded pretty good, so I just left it. And yeah, let's audition it before and after, and we'll see what it sounds like. Yeah, so it just gives it a little bit more weight so that once the chorus comes in, you can feel it a little bit better. So that's pretty much it for the instrumental. Nothing too crazy. But anyways, yeah, we'll continue the conversation tomorrow. All right, take care till then.
I wake up, get up and tell me it's a new day. I wake up, get up and still same, no change. I wake up, get up and tell me it's a new day. I wake up, get up and still same, no change.